Good morning. In today's lecture, I will be telling you the breakdown of each of the following subjects for biology, chemistry, physics, English, and logical reasoning. Now, I will tell you the most important things which we have to study, and I will give you a brief overview of the entire syllabus. So now you have to understand that the most of the questions in the exam will come from biology, which has about 32% of the total cumulative percentage. And now, if you come to how do we have to study it, you need to know that they've written over here about that 80% of the questions basically lie in a easy to moderate category, and only 20% of the questions are hard. And even out of those 20% questions are actual difficult questions are only about 5%. So now another fact is that about 70% of the questions in the sciences will be recalled, which means that basically these questions will be knowledge based and simply the lines from the books would be asked. Now you would be basically worried that which book you should use. I figured out that the best book to use is the federal book used by the Capital Territory in Islamabad, and most of the questions come from there. And out of the 30% application based questions, almost half of them are pretty easy. Now, if we come individually to the syllabus, here is the biology syllabus, which consists of a total of 13 chapters. In the first chapters on biodiversity, the important things which you should know are that the first chapter is basically on viruses. So the important thing is to know about AIDS. For example, the key facts about AIDS is that you need to know that the difference between HIV and AIDS, and you need to know that AIDS leads to opportunistic infection. AIDS itself is not a disease. However, basically what it does is that it reduces the overall immune system of the body such that a person becomes more and more susceptible to other infectious diseases. So basically, it decreases the immune system, and a person is more likely to catch other infectious agents or viral diseases. Similarly, you need to know the structure of viruses. For example, there are single-stranded viruses or double-stranded viruses. Examples of single-stranded viruses include the coronavirus and COVID-19. It is highly infectious because single-stranded viruses are able to mutate rapidly in comparison to double-stranded viruses. And now, and similarly, you need to know the nature of a virus. For example, we all know that a virus is an acellular organism. It is not classified as a living organism because it does not survive outside the host. So this is a pretty basic classification of AIDS and and overall of this chapter. Now, in chapter number 2, the important things you need to know are the chemical equations on photosynthesis. What they will do is that they will give you one of the reactants or one of the products and ask you to tell the rest of them. Similarly, you need to know the difference between aerobic respiration and anaerobic respiration. One thing which they've not mentioned is the lactic acid debt, which accumulates, for example, when an athlete sprints in the Olympics and basically sets a personal milestone of 10 seconds or 11 seconds. In order to basically overcome the energy and the energy requirements, the body basically accumulates lactic acid in the body. And however, after the race, when he rests, the lactic acid is broken down by aerobic respiration. So now the important things in this chapter are the chemical equations as well as the differences between the main chemical reactions. Now in chapter number 3, they basically told us about biological molecules. You need to know the important things are about water. For example, water is we all know that water is 99% abundant in most living organisms, and even in our human body, the overall weight of water is about 70%. Now, if you come to the individual classes, for example, carbohydrates, you need to know the different compositions are such as monosaccharides, disaccharides, and polysaccharides, as well as examples. You also need to know the chemical linkages between them. For example, fructose has alpha 1,6 linkage in it, so you need to know the chemical linkage between glucose, sucrose, and vice versa. Similarly, you need to know the differences between starch and glycogen. For example, starch is uh, present in plants, whereas glycogen is present in animals, and it is a carbohydrate reserve. Now, if you come to amino acids, you should know it's the list of the essential amino acids. common or a good mnemonic is PTV, private Tim Hall, PTV Tim Hall. So you need to know the difference between essential and non-essential amino acids, as well as the basic structure of proteins and the chemical linkage between them. Now I come to the lipids. In lipids, you need to know that triglycerides are basically a fat reserve in the body, as well as the chemical composition of each of them. Now, if we come up to the RNA, you should know three classes, mRNA, rRNA, and tRNA. You should know the function of each of them. Of messenger RNA is to basically just to read the message, tRNA is to deliver the message, and rRNA is basically the synthetic machinery, which is basically responsible for all the transcription and translation events. Now, in the next chapter of chapter number 4, cell structure basically starts off with human biology. You should know all of the components of the cell. However, the most important thing is that most of the MCQs are based like they give you a comparison between an animal cell and a plant cell. We will see about this further on in the slides. So you should know the basic organelles which are present in the cell as well as their function. For example, the endoplasmic reticulum is responsible for making proteins. Further, you should know the differences between smooth and rough endoplasmic reticulum as well as the Golgi apparatus, how it is responsible in the secretions or the modification of secretions. Yeah, I was in chapter number 4. Okay. So other than that, you should know that what is the function of lysosomes. For example, lysosomes are responsible for carrying or packaging for the waste material and the processes which are involved in this, for example, autophagy or phagosomes and the entire phagolytic process you should know. Now you should know about chloroplast and green pigment chlorophyll, which is responsible for photosynthesis. So, as they've written in the learning objectives here as well, that you should know the difference between a typical animal versus a plant cell, as well as the organelles present in the cell. Now, in chapter number 5, we come to the coordination and nervous control. The most important thing in this chapter is about hormones. Hormones, you should know the difference between exocrine and endocrine hormones, and as well as the different types of endocrine glands. For example, the human body has anterior pituitary, posterior pituitary glands, which produce a variety of hormones. You should know, for example, that which hormones are produced by which gland, and the majority of hormones, by the way, are produced by the anterior pituitary gland. For example, the growth hormone, the prolactin hormone, the growth factor hormone. So a lot of hormones are produced by the anterior pituitary. However, there are some hormones such as the ADH or oxytocin, which are produced by the posterior pituitary gland. Apart from this, you should know the difference between a reflex arc and a normal arc. For example, in a reflex arc, the normal arc is bypassed and the basically impulses are transferred directly from the stimulus to the spinal cord instead of going around the brain because it would require a lot of time. So this is basically the summary. Apart from that, you should know the basic structure and composition of a neuron. I said that it consists of dendron and axon and a cell body. A dendron which carries the message towards the cell body, and an axon which carries the message away from the cell body. Now in chapter number 6, which is kingdom animalia, this is basically a lot of rote learning, and you just have this is the least important chapter. Only a couple of MCQs are expected to come from it. Now, the last topic I'll be covering in this video will be enzymes. You should know the pretty basic concepts from, for example, if you studied in O levels, the activation energy, what is the activation energy, enzyme denaturation, the factors on which enzymes depend on, like it's a kinetic energy increases due to temperature, or how it is denatured by other factors such as pH, as well as the enzyme inhibitors. For example, you should know the difference between competitive and non-competitive inhibitors, as well as the examples of each of the following. And you should know the function of competitive inhibitors and non-competitive inhibitors. How competitive inhibitors basically attack to the active site and basically structurally denature the enzyme. However, non-competitive inhibitors attach to a site other than the active site, strain the structure of the enzyme such a way that even if the actual key or if the actual substrate was to fit in the active site, the chemical reaction would not progress. Now I will cover the other chapters in the next video. Thank you.